Credit rating agency Moodys has downgraded India's outlook to negative as the country's growth rate hits a 6-year low. In the report, Moody said that there was an increased risk that economic growth would remain materially lower than in the past, in part due to the reduced government and policy effectiveness.
The country has been struggling with an economic slowdown in the past year. In the second quarter of this year, India's GDP grew at just 5% year-on-year. That's the slowest since 2013.
And Moodys is forecasting India's budget deficit will reach 3.7% of its GDP this financial year, breaching the government's target of 3.3%.
But it's not just GDP growth. A prolonged credit supply crunch has cut lendings by financial institutions and hampered investment. Bad debt has ballooned to over $150 billion and makes up nearly 10% of all total loans.
Well, loan growth in October slumped to 8.8%. That figure is its lowest in 2 years. The country is also seeing its highest unemployment rates in over 4 decades, with young people being hit especially hard.
According to the latest employment survey released back in May, 1 out of 5 young people are looking for a job. Indian markets were hit hard by the news of the downgrade as well, with the Sensex dropping some 330 points to close down over 0.8%.
The Nifty 50 also fell over 100 points, ending down by 0.86%. But despite all this, the government says that Moody's concerns are unfounded and that the fundamentals of India's economy remain strong, as our correspondent Jagruti Dave reports.
The Finance Ministry issued a statement which effectively said, look, nothing to see here. The Finance Ministry said that the fundamentals of the Indian economy are robust. They said that there was a good prospect of growth in the short and mid-term, and quoted the World Economic Outlook, which put growth in India at 6.1% in 2019 and 7% in 2020, saying it was one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. Now, the government is clearly saying that they are going to stimulate growth. They want to attract more investment, and their foreign and local issuing currencies have retained Moody's has retained that at the same level. So there's a sense that the Indian government is saying, look, we're doing okay, but there is more clearly to be done to stimulate growth and investment and look at that unemployment rates here in the country.
The struggling domestic economy may have played a part in India's decision to withdraw from the landmark Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, deal last week in Bangkok. And earlier we spoke to India's High Commissioner to Singapore, Jawed Ashraf, who explained some of New Delhi's concerns during negotiations.
Let me first say that, India understands and believes in the strategic and economic merits of RCEP. Since 2012, we have negotiated in good faith, with a great deal of commitment, and a lot of hard work has gone into it. But there were concerns for our industry and for our agriculture sector in the way eventually the agreement turned out to be in Bangkok. We were particularly concerned, as you can imagine, that our trade deficit with the RCEP countries have gone up from $7 billion in 2004 to about $105 billion in 2018, trade deficit. Now, nearly more than half of it is, of course, with China. So what we were looking for is a set of safeguards that would ensure that there was no dumping. We weren't looking for safeguards to protect our industry, but we were looking for safeguards in a way that would prevent dumping either directly or via other countries.
Despite India's withdrawal, Singapore's Foreign Affairs Minister Vivian Balakrishnan says that the RCEP agreement is still a big deal, with the remaining 15 countries making up about 27% of global trade and 29% of global GDP. He also said it's an enormous achievement that these countries have concluded text-based negotiations.
The deal is expected to be signed by the first half of next year. Dr. Balakrishnan was speaking in an interview with CNA 938 this morning.
15 out of 16 nations concluded negotiations for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership this week. These countries account for 29% of the world's gross domestic product and 27% of global trade. Foreign Affairs Minister Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan says this development is an enormous achievement, even without India.
I cannot speak for India, but my assessment is that they did so for domestic political reasons. And in fact, it illustrates my point that foreign policy, diplomacy, free trade agreements must begin at home. Your own people must be assured that they are competitive, the productivity, the skills, the infrastructure, the system makes us globally competitive. If your own people do not have that confidence, they would be very nervous about entering free trade agreements.
While some countries may shy away from multilateralism, Dr. Balakrishnan says Singapore cannot afford to do so because of its small size. Instead, Singapore needs to remain open, consistent and reliable. This is important when dealing with the United States and China, both of which are embroiled in an ongoing trade spat.
There have been times we've had to respectfully take a different position from the United States or from China. But for them to understand that we do so not because we are doing it at the behest of someone else, but we do so because of our own national long-term interests.
Like you say, we can't be bought.
We can't be bought, we can't be intimidated. And I can tell you from experience, this is a unique position to be in on a world stage for a tiny city-state like ours.
Dr. Balakrishnan also spoke about Singapore's relations with Malaysia. He acknowledged that the relationship is complicated and tensions may arise from time to time.
Fortunately, we've got good and strong relations and ability to communicate at a very senior leadership level. So we're able to overcome misunderstandings. Most importantly, we're able to negotiate as equals, rely on international law. The more we engage them, the more we pursue joint projects, the more we connect to one another, the more we invest mutually, the more interdependent we are, the more stable the long-term relationship will be, regardless of the political vagaries on the other side of the causeway.
Dr. Balakrishnan is glad that both sides seem to be making progress on the Johor Bahru-Singapore Rapid Transit System link. Singapore will also wait for Malaysia's decision on the Kuala Lumpur-Singapore high-speed rail project. Both projects were suspended after a change in government in Malaysia. Dr. Balakrishnan has visited various Malaysian states to better understand their concerns and aspirations and to keep their mind share of Singapore.